welcome to the Financial Fox. I hope you're all well, and this is going to be a very, very cool episode. Before I introduce the special guest, I want to thank you everyone for sharing the content, for liking, for sending all this love and helping us to grow the channel. That's amazing, and thank you so much for supporting us. And okay, here we are. So, who is the special man? A man, a legend, one of the bigger names in the crypto space. With my pleasure, I'm going to introduce Charles Hoskinson, CEO of Input and Output Hong Kong and the founder of Cardano. Hi, Charles. How are you?
Very good. How about you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. So, how is going on there? Where are you, first of all?
I am in warm, sunny Colorado. It's negative 10 degrees outside.
Oh gosh. And how is the situation?
Colorado didn't get hit by coronavirus as hard as other states like New York or California. And so we only had a few lockdowns. And now we're mostly back to normal. We still have to wear a mask, and the restaurants are at half capacity, but they're open and we
Yeah.
can travel freely. So it's not too bad. And I live on a farm, so I have lots of room. I have donkeys and horses and these things. My neighbors have cows. It's very relaxing.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, like also in Italy, I think they started to open up again. There are, still the UK is a bit funny, but they are trying to roll out all the vaccine to everybody before they open up.
Yeah.
Even though they talk about another revaccination, so that will be that would be quite interesting to see.
Well, what they're probably going to do is roll in the coronavirus vaccine with the flu vaccine and make it an annual thing. It'll take about 7 to 10 years for coronavirus if they're doing mass vaccination programs to disappear. But I'm a little skeptical that's even possible. We've never in human history ever vaccinated our way out of a respiratory virus that's reached pandemic scale. We've been living with influenza for 5,000
Yeah.
plus years. So or if not longer. So we're going to be dealing with this for a while,
Are you gonna?
but it'll become a lot less deadly, and
Yeah,
so it won't
exactly.
it won't require the lockdowns.
Listen, are you gonna take the vaccine?
Well, there are a lot of them, and I've been talking a lot about them. So there's Novavax, which is a protein subunit, and then you have AstraZeneca, Oxford, and Johnson and Johnson's, and that's a adenovirus vector. And then you have the mRNA vaccines, which are the really new ones, and they're pretty exciting. So that's Moderna and Pfizer, and they all are very different. Some interact with your DNA, other ones kind of hijack your cellular machinery for a little while and get them to build proteins, and other ones are just proteins themselves, the spike proteins, as kind of like a dummy. So I think the safest of the vaccines is probably going to be the Novavax platform because it's just protein in a jar. It doesn't do anything with RNA or DNA. The DNA ones are the most complex because what they do is they take a virus, a chimpanzee virus, and they genetically engineer it, and then they put viral DNA in it. Kind of comes in like a normal virus, interfaces with your DNA, it makes RNA, the RNA makes proteins, and then the proteins cause a immune reaction. And that's a lot of stuff. And so they're a lot more complex. And I've learned as doing engineering stuff is that complexity is always where you get problems. So the simpler, the better. And that's why I like Novavax, for example, because it's super simple. It's just the spike proteins themselves. You don't actually have to hijack cellular machinery to make them. That said, the real data point is Israel. Over 72% of the country has been vaccinated. So that's at a point where it's at herd immunity levels, and maybe another 10% or 20%, but it's getting very close to that. And they mostly have been vaccinated with Pfizer vaccines. That's a really good safety and efficacy trial. So the Israeli data that's coming out in the next 2 to 3 months is going to be extremely beneficial to understand what are the long-term consequences of this, if these vaccines can break the pandemic, and so forth. And so we'll all have that by June. And actually preliminary data, they are extremely optimistic. In fact, there was a 94% reduction in infections, and the vaccinated people just don't die. If they get sick, it's usually mild to moderate, but we're not really seeing any severe illnesses, which is exactly what you want from a vaccine. So it seems like the clinical trials have been confirmed by observational studies of millions of people in Israel, and they have a centralized medical record system, and so all the Israelis kind of their data percolates to one point. So it's actually very easy to analyze that population, and it's probably the best clinical trial you could ever do.
Okay, so let's see. Anyway, what is going to happen? And that's kind of like an interrogative point because the world is just mad. And then at the same time, though, we are seeing the crypto industry that is booming. So we reach a big milestone with Bitcoin. But, it's not just about Bitcoin.
Right. Well,
So,
it's huge. We
exactly.
have over $1 trillion market cap, but yeah, everybody's talking about altcoins, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and this feels very different from 2017. It's almost like 2017 was the 90s dot-com boom, and then today is now kind of the post 90s boom in the 2010s, where there's much more substance and reality behind the projects and what they're doing. And in the things in the top 10, for the most part, the vast majority of them deserve to be there. They have real companies, real projects, real technology, real protocols. In 2017, there were a lot of things that were high valued that were just copies of a copy of a copy. It sounded like a Nine Inch Nails song. So it feels very different this time around, and I'm optimistic that perhaps we'll have more support and these prices will stay. But who knows? It's crazy industry.
Listen, I want to pick you up there because you mentioned about some project they actually have got good product, but a big problem is about valuation. So
Right.
let's say if I'm an investor that usually invests in the traditional market, you have some kind of reference on how to evaluate a company, how to evaluate something. But here, when you see like crypto project, like Uniswap, 5 billion market cap and stuff like that, you say, oh gosh, these are big numbers. So how would you, I mean, maybe if you have some kind of thought on how you evaluate those projects, what you can say is overvalued and what you can say, maybe this is undervalued.
If I was good at that, I would be the world's best hedge fund trader, and I'd be making so much money right now. The problem is that people are looking at existing institutions like Uniswap. They say, well, how much is the New York Stock Exchange worth or Nasdaq worth through these things? And if that protocol over an arc of time can evolve to that, then it could become much larger because it's a universal exchange for all assets and it runs completely unregulated. So it's just a really powerful, high efficiency thing. And we're seeing problems like with the GameSpot, for example, GameStop issue where they didn't even know if they had the stock on hand. So there's clearly issues in the legacy financial markets, and when you see something like Uniswap, it seems to be solving those issues at least in theory. And so people want to get in early with that. So it creates too much euphoria, and DeFi seems to have too much euphoria. So while crypto infrastructure is much more solid, I'd say the DApp space is starting to look a lot like 2017. So my belief is there's going to be a significant correction in the DeFi space, and a lot of these applications are going to have like 90% reductions in valuation, if not more. And then there'll be some who survive, and the next generation protocols are going to be the ones that are here forever, and they become utilities of the crypto space, and they'll be cross chain. I don't know how to value them. I don't think anybody knows how to value them. It's really difficult. That said, I think Bitcoin's valuation is pretty legitimate given the fact that Tesla's CFO had to actually figure out how to value that and say that's a good idea and talk to the SEC about it. And Oracle will probably do the same thing. And after Oracle does it, probably Apple will do it. So given that Fortune 500 companies are starting to enter the cryptocurrency space, that creates a regulatory backstop. And that tells you that they had to be comfortable enough with the whole ecosystem, the ratings agencies, the custodianship, these other things. And a few years ago, I predicted that this was going to happen. I said that that's the big thing for institutional investment. One minute that occurs, you see very different price because these guys buy and hold. They don't just trade every day like day traders do or retail investors do. They take long term horizons, and they also demand financial products. So we're going to see all kinds of really cool regulated financial products that come and hit the market that are legitimate and list on brand name exchanges and so forth. And that'll help mitigate volatility, give downside protection, which will encourage more companies to come in and take a position. I mean, it's a broader problem. You can't have lumber go up 110% and
Yeah.
steel go up 50% and all these materials go up that much and then say there's no inflation. People don't buy it. The government says, oh, there's only 1.8% inflation from the consumer price index. So prices doubled, or in some cases went up, 200%, and you're telling me that there's no inflation? No, you printed $6 trillion, and this year they're probably going to print $3 or $4 trillion. So the dollar is eroding in value. And these big multinational companies, they hold hundreds of billions of dollars of assets, and they're trying to figure out, what do we do with those portfolios? And what do? You go buy a bond that pays like a 1% yield. You put it in a bank account that pays negative interest.
Exactly.
You get less. Or you go buy a crypto, and a lot of these cryptos have 6%, 12% yields, and they're high growth assets. It makes a lot of sense to go into that industry, and it seems like it's deflationary instead of inflationary. And if you're doing portfolio management, 1-2% is all it takes.
And also, that obviously many people are now talking about ETF, Bitcoin ETF as well, which will be a very interesting product actually for more traditional investors. They don't want to take a direct exposure to Bitcoin,
Right.
for example.
Right, and that's a great point. Is regulated assets on exchanges, ETFs, indexes. Like the one thing I'd love to see created is a third generation index. So you take Polkadot and Tezos and Cardano and F2, and you take Ergo and all these, and Algorand, all these other third generation coins. You just build an index for it. And what's cool about it is they almost all of them have yields. So you buy it, you have a yield, and then you also know that at least one of them is probably going to win the third generation race, and that's going to get a huge appreciation, which will compensate for the depreciation of the rest of the portfolio. And as the value transfer goes from proof of work to these new proof of stake protocols, it really does seem like actually a great investable asset to create. So there's going to be a lot of stuff like that Wall Street starts doing, and Toronto Stock Exchange starts doing, and these other people do over the next 12, 24 months. And that's going to bring in retail and institutional investors in a very safe, sustainable way. That's very different than how they do it on Coinbase or these other things right now. So my hope is the market stabilize a little bit. We don't see things go up 50% or 100% per day. It's not good for anybody.
And what you think regarding exchanges, because one of the concern that people have is obviously that exchanges short coin as well, where if you go on a decentralized exchange, you get more like fair trade, let's say. Do you think that centralized exchanges are going to die soon, and it will be only decentralized, or how do you see that panning out?
Well, as long as regulation exists, you can't really kill the centralized exchange, and there's lots of competition in that infrastructure. And I think what's going to occur is that after the Coinbase IPO, it's going to encourage the traditional actors to start looking into acquiring exchanges or to offering crypto products. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Nasdaq do something at some point. Because if the SEC is okay with Coinbase, then they'd probably be okay with that. And so probably in the next 5 years, there's going to be enormous professional institutional support. And at the same time, DEXs will evolve, and DEXs will be able to embed regulation to the transaction. So you'll only be able to trade like whitelisted KYC wallets or these types of things. And maybe an exchange is part of that as as some linkage to the regulator. But I think that's the next generation of DEXs is, how do you embed DIDs or something that are KYC'd? And then you have authenticated wallets, authenticated transactions, but it's still decentralized and everybody plays a fair game and fair rules. However, the there's no central entity curating or controlling the thing. So it's a diverse ecosystem in that respect. There's also a question of fiat liquidity. So it's really easy to do exchanges completely digital. So it's very hard the minute that you touch dollars or euros or pounds because you have a physical asset and banking infrastructure. When CBDCs come, central bank issued digital currencies, suddenly you can wrap them and then put them into Ethereum and Cardano and other such things. And once you've done that, you now can basically get rid of the banks entirely. And in that case, that's a huge competitive advantage over the traditional legacy exchange infrastructure. And I think that's going to have a huge disruption to the industry. So I'm pretty excited to see where that goes.
Okay, but more excited about, we haven't started to talk about Cardano, but we should. You're probably more excited about that. You hit another milestone today with the more subscriber coming along with the journey, and many things are coming up, the new era as well. Come on, tell us, how are you feeling in this exciting time?
Well, this is last mile. I mean, there's so many things we're turning on. In the next 60 to 90 days, native assets are coming actually before the end of this month. We just announced February 24th as the
Okay.
hard fork date. So it'll be in market early March, because it takes 5 days for that to percolate and upgrade. So that was a huge milestone because the first time ever where Cardano's gone from a single asset to a multi-asset system, and Daedalus from a single asset wallet to a multi-asset wallet. And then the problem is there's like 6 months of UX improvements that we'll probably get because people will complain that they don't like the way something is presented or something like that. All right, yeah, we have to go back and do it. They're very picky. So
Well,
we
I
got
think you are a mathematician, so you might be picky as well.
yeah, it's like when is art done, right? You have too much of that. So that's one dimension. Then in 60, 90 days, a lot of smart contract stuff is hitting, and then we'll seal it out completely, hopefully during the first half of this year. And then we got a cleanup hard fork we got to do around September to add Genesis in and a few other lingering items here and there. So it's a lot of work because there's so much code being written, so much testing, so many meetings. It's exhausting for Ramon, our director of our CTO, and right now our director of engineering. And it's really exhausting for the engineers themselves, and it's exhausting for the product people because it's not like they're doing like one thing. They have hundreds of things that are all in flight. They all have different deadlines, and they have to be coordinated very precisely, and they all have in a cascade for stuff to work right. And so far, they're keeping up with that frantic pace. Then there's on the other side the commercial ecosystem development. So I met with the Celsius guys. We've met with Singularity and we're building all these great relationships and partnerships. And there are a lot of infrastructure plays. Like we talked to Bison Trails, for example, and we've talked to Fireblocks, and we've talked to Prime Trust, and dozens of these things where they say, hey, you need to support Cardano. Oh, sure. It's like, okay, well, then I have to give them an integration team to go and tell them how to do it. And so that's fine when it's one. When it's 30, you have to prioritize that entire queue, and then you figure out how to get all these things in. But it's necessary. You need that for dApps. You need that for institutional investors to come in. You need that for all kinds of different actors. And that's what consumes the majority of our time right now as a company, is just getting all that done and working with our partners like Emergo and the foundation, the Cardano Foundation, to make sure that it gets done properly. On the other hand, we still have to maintain the research arm, and there's a very aggressive research agenda this year, and there's a lot of really cool things that we're going to announce, like Ouroboros Omega, for example, and other such things, which are really rolls up of years of R&D that we've done. And we're trying to build new research initiatives and build new labs. We're going to be announcing several new things, like a smart contract institute that specializes on smart contract development and design, embedded at a university, similar to like the Software Engineering Institute at CMU. Like little stuff like that.
That
So
is,
those are
isn't it? That
was
is
that?
in Wyoming. That is going to be in Wyoming.
There's a good chance of it. So we're negotiating with a few different parties, and I think the most likely it would be at University of Wyoming because we have a great relationship there, and they really like practical stuff. There are some universities that are real into theory. That's what they do, and they're super good at that. And there are other universities that they're really applied, and they like building things and holding things, and they really like actually writing code and stuff. And we've noticed that University of Wyoming tends to be more in that direction than, let's say, Carnegie Mellon, for example. And so that's why we're considering them as a good candidate. And we have such great relationship with the computer science department there, and there's some really good people. But we'll announce that probably in the middle of the year, something like that. But there's just a lot of stuff like that, and it's exhausting. But once it's all done, then we can kind of take a step back, take a vacation, for at least me, for a few weeks,
Or
maybe
to
go to Italy,
eat some nice food.
and when the world reopens, go to Lake Como or something like that. But that'll be fun. And then it's getting balls to the wall Cardano 2025. So there's actually a parallel team that's working on the roadmap and vision for where we'd like to take Cardano by 2025. And we've done over a dozen presentations, and we have this concept called the DCF, the Decentralized Consortium Funding, and all this stuff that we'll announce to the community once we get closer to the completion of the 2020 roadmap. Oh
And
yeah, and also governance, turning over all the voting to the community. So Catalyst is just really getting good. We see a lot of cool stuff there, but there is so much work you have to do to build a government, as our founding fathers learned. And I think Italy's been trying to do that for a while. How many
yeah,
governments they
no,
guys had? Like 70?
I think now they have got a sensible person there, but that maybe is going to look at some numbers and how to drive the economy. But you see, you never know with Italians.
There'll be a discussion.
But listen, Charles, the other things that I'm very interested is all the work that you're doing in Africa, because it's just what you're trying to build is not just a tech company that is rolling out great product, and it's about empowering people. And you always make this point. I don't need to build up something that the US or the developed world can use. I want to build up something that can empower those countries and can give them something
Right.
to leapfrog, and to gain access to finally redistribute properly wealth around the world. Do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
maybe want to tell us a little bit what's going on now, and where do you want to take things forward?
so, Africa is a strange animal because this is a situation where everything looks about right for explosive growth. It's like China in 1980. If you're really clever, you'd look at the top nations in 1980 and say, "Oh yeah, Venezuela and all these other guys are doing well," but China actually was an incredibly poor country. But it was doing things in the right ways to have explosive growth. And so, really clever investors, they showed up very early, and they just entangled themselves in that rocket ship, and they rode it. And now China is one of the largest economies in the world. So Africa is exactly the same. You have a massive demographic shift in leadership. You're going from these old dictator-like leaders, strongmen who are in their 70s and 80s, to 40, 50-year olds who have degrees in computer science and they're very internet enabled and digital. They travel all the right conferences and they have access to the brightest minds in the world. And you have demographics where 70% of Ethiopia's population is at or under the age of 30. So, if you have a bunch of young people who are hungry for new systems, internet enabled and digital natives with young leadership, you're going to see rapid change in the laws, rapid change in the economic structures, and you're going to see the adoption of tons of leapfrog systems. And blockchain is a big component to that. E-voting, blockchain, AI, tons of stuff like this is going to come like wildfire throughout the continent. And with Starlink and these other things, I think the internet gap will be completely resolved within 2 to 3 years. And we're going to see humongous innovation in the telco sector to make sure we can get everybody in Africa online and with a computing device that's reasonably powerful. And because these things have an upgrade cycle every 18, 24 months, these old ones end up in the developing world and they're supercomputers. So your iPhone of today can be the iPhone of Senegal in 3 years, and that's good enough for all the protocols that we run. That's good enough to run a whole country. So I think that within the next 5 years, everybody's going to get it and say, "Wow, this is big." So what we did with Cardano is we showed up 3 years early. We were there since 2016, actually. And we really started getting good in 2017. We built offices in Addis Ababa and so forth. We built all the relationships and we're starting to get government contracts. And there are going to be some big things we announce hopefully soon. And basically, these solidify Cardano in Africa. And it gives us the ability to have explosive growth as they have explosive growth. And what this does for our developers on the Cardano platform is say, hey, if you're going to do DeFi, would you rather have a 25-year-old yield farmer living in his mom's basement in New Jersey? Or would you rather have millions of farmers who this is the only way they're going to get a loan? I mean, that's a very different value proposition. So it's going to encourage lots of developers and things to come, and there'll be huge amounts of wealth transfer and lots of cool financial products. And what's nice is we can eventually run entire governments on the Cardano backend. We can do your voting system, we can do your property management system, we can do your national ID system. All this stuff can be achievable within a 5 to 10 year time horizon. So the leadership looks good, the demographic looks good. Honestly, I feel very, very confident in our competitive plan that we have there. We have great people on the ground like John O'Connor, who's been there long enough to have all the Africa stories you could ever imagine, and we're quite happy to see where we're at. And it's going to be a lot of fun this year, kind of showing the world what we've accomplished and where we'd like to go by 2025.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. I think that was so attractive to me because is there are many challenges in country like Africa, many, and is it takes a lot of courage to go there and say, right, I need to start the groundwork since the real beginning. You know, you have to actually get the people in, you have to create the infrastructure, you have to also understand the problem they have got. How can I solve the problem of property? How can I solve the problem of identity? How can I actually commercialize the value that their country has got, like
Right.
agriculture, like the mines, gold? They've got plenty of gold. And where is going this gold? Is gold all over, but it's not staying in Africa. And then you go down
Right.
the road and you see so many poor people. It's unbelievable, really.
Yeah, and actually China's done that to Africa. It's been horrible, the debt diplomacy that they've done. They put $1 trillion into that continent, but I mean, they go to countries and be like, "Oh yeah, we'll build all this infrastructure," and the countries get real excited, and then they go and empty their prisons and send a bunch of criminals to work basically as slaves, and then after they complete all the construction, they just leave them there. So then you have these roving gangs of Chinese criminals in Zambia and other places. It's the craziest thing you'll ever see, and nobody talks about it. It tells you who owns the media, but I think it's a human rights crisis, and you're 100% right. It's exploitation. There's no difference from what they're doing right now with debt diplomacy and what the Spaniards did with Chorricho, or the conquistadors going through Mexico, or these other things, the horrible things that are there. It's just terrible. And it's just a neo-imperialism. That's what's so refreshing about what we do, because when we come in, we're like, guys, we want you to own it. We want you to be in charge. We want you to build. And that takes a longer time horizon because you have to educate people. Like we train developers and we build infrastructure, and it's open source. There's no proprietariness. There's no debt here. Once they're there, they're building their own business. They're building their own thing. They're building wealth that the government can't take and other people can't take. So you have to have a slightly longer time horizon, but I think it's a much more moral thing to do. And I do it because it makes my country better. If we can make this work in Africa and build a better financial system there, then inevitably that will be more valuable than the American system. And so the only way the American system is going to be able to compete is it has to come home. That system has to go and absorb the other system. New York is not going to let me go be a good cryptocurrency entrepreneur. We tried that. Ben Losky created BitLicense. And every time you try to innovate in a highly regulated economy where the economy is controlled by big companies, they will use crony capitalism to push you out of the market. And you can beg and plead and scratch, and maybe they'll let you come through, but then you have to play by the rules. If you really want to change the world, go change the world for people that no one cares about, because there's no value there. They say, oh yeah, whatever. And then once they get powerful and strong, people start caring about them, but it's too late. They're already in the other system. And as a consequence, that other system can now flourish and grow safely. And it's eventually gets more powerful than the older bad systems. And those systems either die or they have to evolve to adopt the principles of the new system. That's always been my belief.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging to see how America can actually change, particularly when they have a new president that, is not like a young.
Yeah, but look how many times we've changed. I mean, in my lifetime, we've already gone through three major changes. We got the software revolution, and what the hell was software? Imagine Bill Gates saying to his mom and dad, "Hey, I'm going to leave Harvard and I'm going to go do this thing called software." And they're like, "Is that like a baseball card? What is that? You selling sheets?" No, I'm moving to New Mexico. It's totally legit. We're going to write digital code that's infinitely replicatable, but people will pay us for it.
They say
And don't worry.
drugs.
Yeah, it's like good luck. We'll make furniture out of pizza boxes. It'll be a great experience. He's like, you're leaving Harvard. It's like, yeah, no, it's okay. We got this. And then again with the dot-com revolution, Elon Musk and his brother Kimball, when they were running a company called Zip2, they went and were pitching a VC, and he threw a yellow phone book at him, and he said, "You think you guys are actually going to put these guys out of business? You're going to replace these guys?" And Musk is like, "Yes." And nobody believed them. They were like, "You're crazy." So yeah, and then now the internet's like an obvious thing. And again with cell phones, it's like you go around and say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go build a business where you're going to use a supercomputer in your pocket that's always connected to this thing called the internet to be able to push a button and summon a car to come to you for the stranger that you've never met, but you're going to trust them, and it's going to drive you wherever you want to go, including at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're drunk." And now we have Uber. I mean, it's like such an inconceivable business model in 1995, but today it just makes total sense because the cell phone makes total sense. But it didn't make total sense in 2007. And how quickly did those changes come through society? I mean, just look at coronavirus. If I came to you in December of 2019 and say, oh, by the way, Stephanie, you're going to have to wear a mask everywhere you go, and whole countries are going to shut down and you won't be able to see your family and friends, you'd be like, what, did aliens invade? That's
Exactly.
crazy. And that's where we're at in just less than 12 months.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And hopefully it's not going to get worse where you're going to see some kind of weird effect from the vaccine. And then, gosh, then the world is really going to.
Well, it'll hit the Israelis first, and so we'll have a canary in the coal mine. So just wait a few months for that data, and if it looks good, it's like we're okay.
Exactly, exactly. Listen, obviously, you're all focused on Cardano and building great stuff out there. But there are other projects as well. And I wanted you maybe to comment on some of the other projects like that. For example, Polkadot. I don't want you to comment too much on Ethereum because you have done it already 200 times. And all the time, I see that in video, I think that's enough. You left for a reason and you build up something that is proving to be bigger and much more forward thinking, let's say that way. But what about other projects out there that you think have got some right actually, and there will be good partner, good peers to move together?
Well, Polkadot in F2 is the example of what happens in the difference between when you have an untrained genius design something and a real veteran engineer who's smart design something. So that's the difference between Gavin Wood and Vitalik. Vitalik is an incredibly bright guy, and if he went into academia, he'd be like one of the top guys. He's just across many things. He gets things very quickly. And when I was doing stuff in the math world, you'd see a lot of people like this, like a Terry Tao or an Eric Domain or something like that. And just like, yeah, that guy's really bright, and things are obvious to him that are not to others. But the thing is, raw intelligence and capability is useless. It's like a very potentially talented artist. Yeah, you can paint, but you really need a master to come in and help refine and give you discipline. And then after you've done that, you can become a Da Vinci. So in 5, 10, 15 years, as he gains more experience, I think he'd get to the level where Gavin is at. Gavin Wood is a very, very solid, very pragmatic engineer. And Polkadot is everything F2 should frankly be. They're using a variant of our consensus algorithm, Ouroboros, that they modified to have better properties for their ecosystem. But they started from very solid foundations that they understood were real. So they didn't reinvent everything. They didn't try to reinvent the wheel. They started from something that was already there that they felt had good merit and modified it to work with what they wanted. Second, they have much more graceful sharding model. So right now, it doesn't shard like F2 will, but it's significantly easier to implement, reason about, maintain, and so forth. Good smart contract model and good ecosystem that they're building out. If Polkadot with F2, it would already be in market because it already is. And we wouldn't have these massive gas fees, and it would be significantly harder for me to compete against Ethereum at the moment. But instead, they've chosen to go with this incredibly complex roadmap that's like a roadmap to hell. It's just so much stuff. There's so many moving pieces. It's very, very intricate. And a lot of things can go wrong. And every step of the way, you take a step forward, and then you have to take 2 steps back, and then 3 steps forward, and then 2 steps back. It's not pleasant to be in that situation. I made the same mistake with Cardano. We tried to do way too much too quickly. We said Haskell development. No one really done that well before for crypto. We said, let's do a lot of research where we're actually engaging the peer review process through conferences. Let's do formal methods. Let's do novel network stack, novel programming language, novel accounting model, novel consensus. And that cost us a lot of years, and it was brutal and horrible. And I paid that price. And I go through it all over again. I've done things very differently and much more gradually. Whereas Gavin just did it the right way in the beginning with Polkadot. It shows you really knows what he's doing. So I have a lot of respect for that. We of course are rivals in certain respects, and he's sometimes not said the kindest of things about me, and I'm sure I've not said the kindest of things about him. But personal stuff aside, there is a professional respect for the Polkadot team and what they've done with that ecosystem. And he is a real engineer, and he does have real engineers around him. It's the same for Algorand. Silvio Macaulay, he has the luxury of being at MIT and being the big guy at MIT. He's a Turing Fellow. That's the Nobel Prize of computer science. And a lot of the stuff we use, he helped invent it. So it's like if Adi Shamir created a company, it's like, of course, he would have everybody. Everybody wants to work for him. So very wisely, he's attached himself to a good business development team and a good development team that writes great code. And the ecosystem development, the code development of Algorand is quite nice, and it's a great project. And there's a lot of rigor and merit behind the things that they do. So I have a huge amount of respect there. I think the only mistake they made was the token distribution. I had dinner with him years ago with one of our cryptographers, Peter Gaji, and I said, Silvio, you should really consider doing an airdrop to Bitcoin. Just be MIT's Bitcoin instead of doing a new distribution. And had he done that, I think Algorand probably be at a $5-10 billion market cap minimum instead of where it sits, and have a lot more adoption and notoriety and liquidity. It's really hard in these markets to bootstrap a completely new ecosystem from scratch. We did it with Cardano. It was brutal. And it required me to go do 55 AMAs, to go to 52 countries, to be on the phone 100 hours a week.
All the time.
Yeah, I mean, I probably gonna get cancer from all the cosmic
No,
rays in the
no.
planes. I mean, it's like you have to do a lot to do that, and if you start from somewhere, you have a much easier time. It's much easier to bootstrap. So I think that was the only Achilles heel of the Algorand strategy. On the other hand, tech's solid, people are solid, and they've done things I wish I could do. Like he went to Tal Rabin and be like, "Hey, give me the whole IBM crypto research team." And he just poached them. And I was like, he got Craig Gentry and all these other people. I was like, oh, yeah, didn't Craig invent homomorphic encryption with Dan Benet? Man, I wish I could do that. But you can do that when you're the big guy at MIT. And maybe one of these days I'll have that rep. Who knows? So then I respect that. Tezos has always been an interesting one. They've had some great ideas. Their community hates me with an unrelenting passion. They just really do not like me. On the other hand, I've always said positive things about the roadmap vision and the project. I like OCaml. It's a great programming language. I love what they've done with formal methods. I really enjoy that there are other people who think about governance like we do, where they based their initial voting system on medieval Venice. So you can't complain too much about that. So there's some cool stuff that's in the Tezos ecosystem, and I think they're a real third generation cryptocurrency. I've also been a big fan of Ergo. I mean, he's Alex Chirpinoy is a Cardano alum and IOHK alum. He originally worked for us, and before that, he was in the NXT ecosystem and did a lot of cool projects. But Ergo is just a great example of a cryptocurrency that has a right to exist. Who knows how big it's going to be, but it does novel, interesting things. They tried non-outsourceable proof of work. They have Sigma protocols. I think they're the first to market for that, and they're actually doing extended UTXO like we are, but they're doing it a little differently. And so there's a lot of merit to the things he's talking about, and he's actually trying to solve real problems like UTXO growth with a concept called UTXO meltdown. And he was the first cryptocurrency with a proof of no pre-mine. There's a little stuff like that, and it's just a small little Russian project. No one pays any attention to it. It should be in the top 20 or top 30, and it's sad that it's not. And what else do I like? I mean, I know Jay Kwan and the Cosmos guys who are always saying reasonable things, and we obviously do work with Ethereum Classic, and we hope the community wants to go on and upgrade that. I really like what Dash did. They were one of the first to do treasuries. And of course, we like the Horizon guys. It gave us an excuse to do privacy stuff, and we learned a huge amount from that. So a lot of fun projects and a lot of good people in this space.
What about NFT?
What was that?
NFT.
Yeah, non-fungible tokens. Yeah. Uh,
Are you a
they're
fan of that? They're a bit a niche because when you mention like,
oh no, they're not a niche. I mean, I
oh,
have Magic the
I just
Gathering cards.
discovered them.
I mean, it's like we've been doing it as humans forever. Like my dad had baseball cards,
Yeah.
and I have Magic the Gathering cards. I still have a Black Lotus floating around somewhere, So there's obviously people who collect things, and this concept of non-fungibility, it can be extended to art, it can be extended to all kinds of cool stuff. I tell you, we support that with our native asset standard, but I'd like to do some really out there, crazy, exotic stuff for non-fungible. Like one idea I had, I listened to an interview that Lex Friedman did with this gal who runs a company called Replica,
Yeah.
and she's creating AI chatbots, that you interact with, and it's for companionship. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be so cool to create an AI chatbot where the parameterization is kept private and it's non-fungible. So there's only one copy of that. And then when you buy it, you buy a unique personality AI chatbot. So there's a lot of cool innovation you can do with licenses and art and other things in that particular space. And I think that cryptocurrencies give you a very fertile ground for that. There's some of the cool things like crypto kitties and so forth were just so innovative, and that's the fun part of crypto. And if you get one of these things right, you bring millions of people in. By the way, we think about non-fungible as non-human things, but you also non-fungible could be your brand. You could tokenize yourself and say, okay, I'm going to
Yes,
issue Stephanie coin.
that's true. You can tokenize yourself. That's kind of the scary things because I was thinking about, right, let's take I have a few photos and I can tokenize that, but then it's gonna go out there where there are other people they are tokenizing some other stuff that you might want to be associated with.
Yeah,
So
well,
it's
your
an
earning
open
potential.
space, and it can be anything, and you know it's a very interesting space, I think. um it's true you can tokenize different aspects of your personality.
Well, even your earning potential. There's like people who go to the Caribbean and Central America, and they pay for the education training of all these young kids to become baseball stars. And they make a deal that if you get a Major League Baseball contract, then I'll get 10%, 20% of that contract in the advertising revenue for some X period of time. So it's a good deal for the kids because it gives them a chance to do things that because of where they were born, they had no opportunity to do. And if they make it big, it's like, okay, it's like an extra 10% tax. It's like, it's not going to kill them. They're millionaires. But so that's an example of like securitizing yourself and your future earning potential. So, how much would you pay to, have Ben Shapiro or Joe Rogan or, one of these figures earning potential if you securitize them and you get a dividend based upon, some proportion of their overall revenue that they make. So this is the kind of stuff that will eventually come, and it may be an alternative way to finance education or personal development instead of
Or
just
creative, such as music, for
yeah,
example.
yeah. Like we do this with music all the time. Like you can own part of the Rolling Stones portfolio and then the royalties that they get from the music that they have. Well, yeah, yeah, up and coming musicians can tokenize themselves and then, pre-sell 20, 30%, kind of bootstrap their lifestyle. And then, they get 70% of their earnings and the other 30% of the tokens. And if they want to get their earnings back, they have to buy them back or something. So, this is the cool stuff that will come in 2030 and 2040 as a consequence of the NFT space. And people are going to get crazy creative with these things.
That's going to be funny. Listen, before we wrap it up, I just wanted. I know that you are very health focused, very health conscious. Let's say that way. You do fasting. You are kind of keen to experiment these different ways of um, boost your resilience in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Do you maybe want to comment on what obviously is happening in the world with coronavirus? People are getting more into health, but also the health space is developing very fast and is trying to help any human being to optimize his performance and obviously live longer as well. Tell me something. Tell me what you like. Tell me what your fun in this space.
Well, let's see. It's long walks on the beach. No, yeah, health is so incredibly important. And I've been a bad actor in the last few months. I've kind of let my weight and my discipline that I normally have go a little too far. And just because we've been so busy and I've been stressed out of my mind, the first demon you have to slay on your road to being healthy is stress. You have to remove toxic people from your life and stressors from your life and be better at managing stress. If you can't manage stress, metabolically, you fall apart. Your cortisol levels go up and it causes havoc. It causes inflammation. Inflammation is what ends up giving you diabetes and heart disease and all these other things. There's a huge body of evidence on this great book from Benjamin Bickman called Why We Get Sick, and it talks about that. And he's a researcher over in Utah. So first, you got to manage your stress, and that's super hard for a lot of people. Yeah, maybe you're a single mom, maybe you got an abusive boyfriend, maybe you got a shit job, whatever it might be. There's a lot of stuff there. So that might take months to years to get yourself to a position where the stress goes away. Now, parallel to that, you are what you eat. And so you have to manage not only your diet, but your microbiome. And you have to figure that out. So put good things in your body. And there's a holy war between the vegans and the keto people. If you pick one side, it's like you're pure evil to the other side. But I'm not so militant about that. It's more about saying things that are refined are probably a bit too much for us. So if, is sugar good or bad? There's a huge amount of research on both sides, but they all kind of agree natural sugar probably better than refined sugar. So if you're putting syrup on the pancakes, put your maple syrup, not your high fructose corn syrup, that type of stuff. Now, that's the other thing is get your diet right. And again, there's tons of great resources in these things, and parallel to that is your microbiome. So probiotics, prebiotics, these types of things. There's a huge body of research showing that that is super important. And if your biome is screwed up, you can never lose weight properly, or you don't actually make the proper neural transmitters, or whatever, because your gut actually does a lot of more than people think. So that's step two. Three is healthy exercise, and that doesn't mean go be a bodybuilder at the gym, but do 30 to 45 minutes of cardio a day. Just something like that. Get on a treadmill, row. Yeah, just basic stuff, and consistency matters. It's better to do a little bit of cardio 6 days a week than just kill yourself at the gym one day a week for 2 hours or 3 hours. And that alone, if you just can figure out those three things, you're probably adding 10 or 20 years to your life, and you're a lot healthier. You have a lower chance of neurodegenerative diseases, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, all this stuff. But then when you actually look at the fourth category, it's like, how do you go above and beyond that? There's an emerging field of experimental medicine called regenerative medicine, where they're looking at stem cells and exosomes, and they're looking at a lot of different therapies, where how do you encourage the body to get younger or heal itself? So there's red light therapy, like you get a Novathor bed, horrendously expensive, but there's good science there. Float tanks, hyperbaric treatments. There's a great
I've done
protocol.
hyperbaric, Charles. It's awesome.
Yeah,
You feel
it's
great when you come out. Your mind is really clear. So
and
that's
not only Yeah, not only that, it actually the data that's coming out of Israel. There's a researcher there who's been doing peer-reviewed studies, and he published a paper in Age magazine or Age journal, which is an anti-aging journal. He shows that it increases telomere length and actually helps regenerate neurons. And they did MRIs and blood tests where they looked at telomere length, and they did brain scans to see people's cognitive performance. And so hyperbaric therapy is definitely, we tend to look at it for things like the bends and maybe wound healing, but it turns out it can actually have systemic impacts on everything from cognition to age. So, there's emerging therapies that are coming, and I do play around with them. I recently went down to Florida and got an exosome treatment.
what about
So
cryotherapy?
cryotherapy is interesting. So I've done that too. The center that I used was shut down for Corona. So all the guys around that do freezing, they're just a little too far away. But yeah, you go and bathe in liquid nitrogen. It's at negative 180 or something like that, ridiculously cold. And you do it naked for about 5 minutes. So it's the coldest you'll ever be in your entire life. But I did enjoy it, and it was very refreshing. I'd have a really hard day. I'd leave the office. I had a subscription, so I'd go as often as I wanted to, and I tried to go and freeze myself for 5 minutes, and that just would feel good for the rest of the day.
Well, I was gonna try that, but if you have piercing, you need to take them off because apparently the metal it can get the skin damage, or anyway, it's not
Right.
good to be in such a massive cold. Yeah, but that's I think you said all good stuff, and also obviously maybe we want to talk about sleep as well, which
Yeah.
obviously is very important.
Yeah, and actually, that's super important. There's a great book, Whitman or something. He was on the Rogan podcast, but there's all kinds of literature now that's showing if you're not sleeping well, it's devastating to you. It can have profound long-term health consequences. In fact, I even have a device for sleep. Ah, So this is my latest acquisition in the neural brain stuff. So it's got a bunch of little leads on it. You put
Yeah.
it on, and it trains your brain how to fall asleep faster.
Okay.
I
In deep
have
sleep.
deep sleep, yeah, deep REM sleep, and so forth, and so yeah, I have a lot of gadgets that are related to sleep, but everybody's a little different. Apparently, Trump only had to sleep 4 hours, 5 hours, and he was fine. Some people, they have to get 9 hours, but most people like 6 to 8. But just make sure that you get consistent sleep and practice good sleep hygiene. So blue light has a huge impact on your circadian rhythm. So if you're looking at your phone or a monitor 30 minutes to an hour before you try to start falling asleep, it's going to mess up your melatonin. And what that does is it fucks up your circadian rhythm. So as a consequence, you can fall asleep. And so a lot of people are having terrible insomnia just because of their blue light on their phone. So a lot of phones have blue light filters, but I recommend just turn your phone off about an hour before you go to bed.
And then relax. That's important. Listen, Charles, it was a pleasure to have you on the show, and I really enjoyed this chat.
Yeah, this was so much fun. Thank you so much. And
Thank
I
you
can't
so
wait for the
much.
world to reopen. The next one we can do in person.
Exactly.
Ciao.
Ciao, Charles. Okay, this is everything from the Financial Fox today. I really hope that you enjoyed this interview, and please keep sending us love, subscribe to our channel, and I will see you next time.